Hello, everyone. It is week 26 of Reasons to Hope. We have been writing the Book of Hope together for 26 weeks. That means we're halfway through the year. And it's such a beautiful time to gather with the weather warming up. And I was in Maine last week, which some of you joined us last Monday. And I actually made it back to Ohio and have so many gratitudes for just the experiences that I had traveling for the first time in so long and just being out in nature. Last week, I read this beautiful story on Root and Vine that Sarah Wells wrote, and I'm going to read a quote from that story. In this story, she interviewed Rachel Barkley, and this is what Rachel said. Sometimes limitations are a gift. God is at work. God is speaking. God is healing. I've always believed that. After this event in my life, I believe that even more, but my perception of what miracles look like has shifted. This is so much bigger than I could have ever imagined. So the story on Root and Vine gave me a lot to think about, and I wanted to talk with Rachel directly and bring her to Reasons to Hope. And I'm so thrilled to invite her to join us today. Barkley. And hello, everyone. It's so good to see you all. Hello.
Hi, Kate. Am I
How
coming through
are
all
you?
right?
You are. You are. Where are you coming from?
I am actually on the road this week, so I'm normally based in a suburb outside of Washington, D.C., but today I am in Nashville visiting,
Oh,
um,
Nashville.
yes, beautiful Nashville, visiting my husband's brother and my brother.
Awesome. Yeah, we talked a little bit about how connected that community is and how many people within Reasons to Hope and the songwriters, Our Story, Our Song, have come out of that scene. So that's so cool that you're down there.
Yes, it's tempting me to move this way, but we do love our home around D.C.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. Like I said, I've been so inspired by your story, and I would love if you would be willing to share a little bit of it with Reasons to Hope.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I've been inspired by the stories that you're telling and, looking through the archives. I've learned so much about hope, so I'm really honored to be here.
Oh, thank you.
Um, yeah, so my story was very unexpected. 2 years ago, almost this month, 2 years ago, I had been about a month out from having my baby boy. This is my first and only child, had him in May of 2019. And I had actually just turned 30. So it was my 30th birthday. Then I had my baby and was going through the normal tough first month recovering from giving birth. And things were just not right. I started being really off balance and in a lot of pain and couldn't sleep for reasons beyond just the baby needing to be up all night. And eventually, after a series of doctors kind of dismissing my pain, went to the emergency room and the doctors found a very large tumor inside my spinal cord. And at the time, I didn't know that this is an incredibly rare thing to happen, and especially to a young, healthy 30-year-old. So needless to say, I mean, it's hard for me to think back to that moment because it was incredibly shocking. And I went to the emergency room because my right leg had become paralyzed mysteriously. And so this tumor was very quickly paralyzing my body. So I needed to find a neurosurgeon to remove it quickly, or else more and more of my body would start shutting down. So God, through a series of little miracles that I could talk about on its own podcast, found an amazing neurosurgeon in Baltimore. And he, almost in a miracle in and of itself, removed the whole tumor. We found out it was benign, thank God. So I didn't have to have chemotherapy or anything. But the surgery was the spinal cord is so sensitive that I woke up a quadriplegic. So from my shoulders down, had little sensation or movement. And that started a long journey, 2 year long journey to get as much movement back as possible. Praying really hard, praying with thousands of friends and people who heard the story around the world. and working really hard day in and day out to get movement back in my fingers and then my arms and eventually my core and moving on down through my legs. And the Reader's Digest version is through lots of therapy. I am now able to walk with crutches, which we can talk about the journey of hope and in hoping to walk again. I was not guaranteed that. Doctor said they have no idea how much will or won't heal because the spinal cord is so complex. So I could have been like full quadriplegic for the rest of my life. I could get a little bit back. But what I have gotten back in just 2 years, I think is miraculous.
Let's talk about where does hope, I can't even begin to imagine, first off, waking up in the shock of all of that. So what was your journey from maybe finding hope again, and then how has hope sort of transformed now that you have this experience and this perspective that so many people don't have?
My journey of hope is definitely not linear. um, I really struggled with how to have hope and really struggled with the idea of hope coming up empty. And, I think I'd experienced this in little ways before this event, but this was so tangible and so physical. I remember early in my 20s, I had this thought of like, well, I really hope and pray that I meet my best friend to get married to and spend the rest of my life. And I'm afraid to ask God for that because what if it doesn't happen? I remember having that thought in my 20s. And then lying in the hospital bed, lots of moments where, I needed someone to move me in the bed. So I'm literally like, I can't even like turn to my side without help. And I'm totally immobile lying in my hospital bed and, in moments of darkness alone at night and thinking, what if I really am hoping and praying and putting my hope that God's going to heal me? And what if 20 years goes by and I'm not healed? What is that going to do to my faith? What is that going to do to my joy? What if that hope doesn't come out the way that I am praying it will? And really being worried about that, and having to come to terms with what that might look like, unanswered prayers and hopes coming up empty.
How did you decide to hold on to hope in the midst of all of that?
Man, again, it's been a roller coaster. But through a lot of reading of other people who experience suffering and hearing their stories and coming to the realization that things are not just hopeful and joyful when everything turns up roses, when everything turns up perfectly. That is not the only situation in which we can have joy and which we can experience God's goodness. And coming to that tough road of, sometimes grief and joy and hope and pain live simultaneously. It's not, once I experience my healing, once the grief goes away, once I'm over this hump, or once I meet the right person or whatever it is, then I can know that hope is real. Then I can know that God is good. I don't think that our culture and the church prepared me for, oh no, the whole of life is not heaven. Heaven is not here around us. Actually, this world is full of lots of suffering, and you are not the exception for suffering. Everyone is going to suffer in some way. Some ways may be more dramatic or others, but either way, everyone experiences pain. And I'm going to have to realize that grief and hope can live in the same space, and I can have joy in the very same instance and gratitude in the same instance that I have despair even. And life doesn't go on hold until things turn out the way I want them.
I listened to your podcast which I love. And so everyone go and find the Barkleys. That's what it's called, correct? Yes.
It's called We're the Barkleys.
We are the Barkleys. So subscribe, yes. Follow wherever you listen. I today I was listening to, I think, episode 15, and which is about disability. And it struck me, your conversation with your husband, it was full of joy and full of love and patience and gentleness. And I was struck by just this sort of general sense of, you are living with it all at once, and that's inspiring, because what you're saying is true. Like, hope is not about arriving and checking a box and saying I got what I hoped for, yay for me, or thank God I can continue to have faith in God, but it's also, my mom used to say, the degree to which you can experience grief is also, and loss, that's the same degree to which you experience joy, and gratitude. And the spectrum, or sort of this spectrum of emotions that surround our daily life, and the survival, and then the thriving, and figuring out how to relate to one another. But your love that you and your husband have, and that the way that you communicate your own experience and talk about things that should be really are very scary, and listening on the outside, I can only imagine. And then for people who have gone through similar experiences, I'm sure that's so healing to hear. But I just wanted to thank you for, being so courageous, bearing witness, and being real about, what you said, that everything about miracles has shifted for you. Like, could you speak a little bit to that, and like just where you're at now, in your experience
Yes.
of hope and joy?
Yeah, so I mean, I could shout it from the rooftops 10 times a day how grateful I am to have the husband that I have. And he and I get to go through this together. And I know not everyone gets that in their suffering. Like a lot, like I feel empathy for suffering alone is really difficult. And certainly he can't empathize with everything I'm going through, but we process through a lot of this together. And the the journey that we've been on together has been helpful, seeing it through his eyes, and he has been strong when I'm weak, and I think vice versa. And we had this moment in the hospital that was kind of the low point. And for anyone listening in who's heard me talk about this before, sorry if you hear this story again, but I hit this really low point in the hospital where I was struggling with different parts of my body that were not working, and really angry about it. And I was just sobbing to him. I mean, we've had so many guttural sobs together in this, short 5 years of marriage. And I just said, and he was sitting with me, late at night in the hospital, and I said, it's not fair. It's not fair that I have to experience this. Doesn't God see me? And if he sees me, why isn't he doing anything? Why isn't he giving me a pick up my mat and walk moment? I've said of, I believe that he can heal. I believe that. Why isn't he doing it? Um, and, my husband just gracefully said in that moment that maybe the greater miracle is showing how to suffer well, and with grace and perseverance. And that was hard to hear, right? I wanted to be instantly healed. I wanted to step up and be done with that rehab hospital that I was in for months, and get on with living with our 3-month-old son. And I did, who wants to take this really long road of suffering? Nobody wants to sign up for that. Um, and that really stuck with me, and I marinated on it. Maybe in the moment I was like, oh, I don't want to hear that. But marinating on it, and now seeing through 2 years of really having to persevere and dig in deep, and what that has built in me. And I think you alluded to this when you said the kind of depth of suffering brings a depth of joy. And the joy and gratitude, I feel it's hard to describe, but because of those low lows, because I've experienced nearly dying, the joy and the gratitude are so deep for what I have. I mean, probably all moms do this, but when I'm putting Hudson to bed at night, I repeatedly just like cry over his little features and think like, this is amazing. I get to love him and I get to love my husband. Like, this is the best gift ever.
Oh,
Um, so maybe every mother feels that, but I feel like my depth is so deep now.
that's so beautiful. So you all recently went on a vacation. I saw you shared a photo with us. Where did you go?
Yes, so this is actually we said we've had two last summers. So the first summer I was in the hospital and literally did not see the light of day. And then the second summer of Hudson's life, it was COVID, so nobody was traveling, and you all joined me in being homebound. And so this has been our first real summer, and this is our second trip to Nashville this week. And then we did a trip to the beach where we had a wonderful, accessible resort, did the boardwalk. We went down to the ocean in a beach wheelchair. And it almost felt like this is normal, even though I'm doing this all very differently than we would have had I not been disabled.
Mm. And we talked a little bit last week when we connected for this about how your life was before and your connection with nature and with the outdoors and maybe now how you're rediscovering that. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Man, this has been a complicated journey, Kate. Thanks for asking about it. And this has been one of the harder things for me. Nature has been incredibly important to me. I grew up on a mini farm with cows and chickens and running barefoot through the grass and in the wilds of Florida, and just it was so much a part of my childhood. And then in my 20s, I really ex experiencing nature was my hobby, my release, my spiritual moment, kind of my everything. And I ran marathons through, Washington, D.C.'s parks, and the whole city, got to know it on foot very viscerally, right? And my husband and I, we went scuba diving in Zanzibar together. I've climbed Half Dome in Yosemite. I climbed lots of mountains, and I experienced nature very physically. Everything was kind of being hands-on physically in nature. And nature is very inaccessible and inhospitable if you have mobility challenges. And so I've struggled to think like, well, that used to be my release, is going for a walk in nature or whatever. And now it's a passive experience of nature, and I'm not a very passive person.
Mm.
So I've really struggled with how to take that love I once had and just being able to observe, and honestly that quietness of the soul that I know will reap rewards spiritually, is hard for me. And so I'm having to kind of start from scratch and relearn my relationship with creation.
Mm. It sounds like there's these ways potentially to experience nature that are actually harder to access because they're, like you said, it's not the quick, immediate physical sort of, I'm going to scale this mountain or I'm going to, do this extreme, have this extreme instant connection. Um, but almost that there's got to be so much more that could open up when we can sit still. It makes me think of that verse, be still and know that I am God. That seems to me like the hardest commandment sometimes, because first off, be still, yeah, right. Second, like, and just like that must be where we actually can find this real true connection and sense of absolute, yeah, connection and with our faith and with God. I mean,
Absolutely. And I think, part of that, another discovery along this journey is I used to, I think, believe that ultimately living limitless is an excellent life goal. Like, I want to live limitless. I want to have no physical restraint, all the energy in the world. And the reality is, none of us are going to live that way, wheelchair or not, right? Everyone's going to age. Everyone's going to experience sickness or injury or something, as you age. No one is, bionic. And um, having to experience limits physically earlier than most people maybe get decades to prepare for it mentally, and it just kind of hit me on my 30th birthday. Um, those limits I've realized actually are a gift.
Mm.
And I've had to, I, I have a very clear bank of energy, a very clear limit on what I can do physically. And living within those limits has then freed me up to prioritize and then live fully into the priorities that I set because I can't
Mm.
do more than that. And you know what? That's true for everyone, but I feel it more intensely and have given up all the things I can't do and enjoyed the things within the limits. And I think that that will translate into what I do out in nature, but it will require learning a new habit of stillness.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Well, before we say goodbye today, you had dropped a song on our Spotify playlist, our Reasons to Hope playlist. Could you tell us what that was and why you chose that?
Oh my goodness. I have really loved Ellie Holcomb. Now here I am in Nashville. Ellie Holcomb's new album, Canyons, and her song Canyon spoke to me about it's about how kind of the waters carve through the canyons and just a really quick, cool God story. I was having a tough day at one of my workouts at the gym and just feeling like, oh, this really tough physical journey is not getting easier. These workouts are very difficult, and when is it going to end? Um, and just kind of down about where I was at. And I listened to this song, and it was just kind of brought me to tears. And I get home, and there is a postcard waiting for me at the dining room table. And it is a postcard that a friend sent from the Grand Canyon with an inspirational message right after I heard that song. And
Wow.
so this like little God moment of like, no, I see you in your pain. And this message about canyons just felt like a little gift from God.
That's so beautiful. Well, I can't wait to listen to it with that story in mind. And thank you again so much for sharing with us for the story on Root and Vine and joining us today. It means so much to hear from you.
Well,
And
it's such an honor, and thank you for putting this content out there. I think hearing stories of hope and learning more about the depth of that word is so helpful in our current moment and just for people generally. So thank you, Kate, for what you're doing here.
oh, well, and I want to thank everyone who's joined us today. Remember that you can share your own reasons to hope anytime on your socials. Tag at Root and Vine News, hashtag Reasons to Hope. And if Rachel's story is resonating with you, we would love to know how. You can comment on the video today. It will go up in the archives on our IGTV. And don't forget to follow her podcast. And then where should we follow you on anywhere else?
Oh, yes. On Instagram, I'm at RK Barkley. And yes, you can find our podcast with my husband and I. We talk about intersection of politics and culture and Christianity. And that is We're the Barkleys on iTunes podcast.
So good. Awesome. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great week. We'll see you next Tuesday because we're going to observe Independence Day. We'll see you Tuesday at 3 o'clock Eastern. Can't wait to see you all again. Thank you. Bye.